Welcome all to the web data extraction sessions, a session about web scraping, web crawling, how to extract data, how to get external data that we all need in this age of AI and ML models and age where data is the new oil. A bit about me, one concise slide. I come from a company called Pontes Technology, a Croatian company which is part of a bigger Bridgewest group. We're doing all sorts of stuff with AI, with data, and my part in all of this, I'm the AI customer delivery manager, which means that I ensure that everything goes smoothly with the project, so that the clients are happy, that that the internal team is happy, that everyone is happy in the end. And of course, I would say around half of my work is also doing Python programming, which mostly consists of stuff you'll see today. So this is my field of specialty. For the general agenda, what we will cover today, we'll start with the theory and definitions. That's in total one slide, everything you need to know about the theory. Then we'll dive into the legal part of the whole presentation. The most important question, of course, being, is it legal? We will try to answer that question as good as we can. Then we'll dive into the methodology, how to do it, how to stay polite to ensure that everything is legal. And then we'll end with the cookbook and the tools. So what do you have at your disposal to do that stuff? So to crawl the web, to scrape the targeted data that you've targeted on a certain website. Regarding the theory, web data extraction is the umbrella term for this. So web crawling and web scraping are two definitions that you have to cover. Web crawling being the indexing of sites that you are targeting. So maybe you do not need to crawl a website. Maybe you just have one web page with one URL address. Then you need just to scrape to extract the data from the HTML of the site. But if there's more than one site, then you need to crawl the web. So you need to crawl the server, look for follow links, and recursively follow and visit every URL address on the web server. And that's a continuous cycle. So you crawl the web, and each time you visit a new site, you scrape the data that you see on the site. That is contained within the presentation layer of the web, of course, being the HTML document. And that's pretty much it about the theory. We can also mention some of the use cases. Of course, the most important question to always ask is why. So here, why extract web data? Why is it important? And why is it important to talk about web data extraction? I would say the two most popular use cases for web data extraction nowadays are lead generation, or also called sales prospecting if you're going one step further, where you scrape all sorts of data, all sorts of contacts from different companies, different people from different sites that are relevant to your business. And price optimization, especially in Croatia, we had a new law at the beginning of this year where all the supermarkets, all the stores have to have their prices listed online. So it was a great opportunity, of course, for different companies, different people to construct their own scrapers and analyze the prices. But of course, in the retail sector, various companies do the price optimization part where they analyze the competitors. And of course, for any data collection automation process where you need more data, where you need, for example, to train an AI model, an ML model, then if you need external data, you can always check on the internet because it has all sorts of data. Regarding the methodology, the first question, of course, that is being asked is it legal? And as with all important stuff in our lives, the answer is, of course, it depends. Is it legal if you're gonna be polite, if you're gonna follow some rules, some methodology regarding web scraping, then you're probably going to be fine. But if you're going to scrape big, huge amounts, huge volumes of data, and if you're going to use that data to maybe be a competitor to the site that you're scraping, then you're more into the gray zone of things. There have been various lawsuits in this field. The most popular probably being the LinkedIn one, and LinkedIn up to today is mostly hostile towards any scraping, any automated use of the platform. This one was called HiQ versus LinkedIn. As you can see, it has been a bumpy ride. HiQ, I believe, in the beginning sued LinkedIn because they blocked them. Then LinkedIn countersued. The US court decided that the web scraping was legal in this case, but then the whole decision got overturned. And nowadays, today in 2025, we're still not there yet to define if it's legal or not. But you can, as you can see, if you're gonna push it, then you're probably going to a lawsuit. Web scraping policies, or web crawling policies to be more specific, there were 4 that were described in a very good paper, which is 20 years old, over 20 years old, by Carlos Castillo, and it's still very, very relevant for web crawling. It describes 4 policies. So selection policy, what to target on a website, what's relevant, what's not. Revisit policy, when to scrape it again, when to crawl the site again to check for updates. Both are defined in a sitemap, usually are defined in a sitemap, which we will see later. Politeness policy, probably the most important one. You should not overload the server. You should only scrape sites that you're allowed to scrape, and so on. And the parallelization policy, how many concurrent scrapers and how are they organized to get the job done. So regarding the mechanisms, we have 6. We have, of course, many more micro mechanisms, but those 6, in my opinion, are the most important. The first one that you should always check is the robots.txt. It's called the robot exclusion protocol, which states on the root of each web server, it states what you're allowed to scrape and what you're not in a defined syntax. So user agent, the ID that identifies all the web scrapers, asterisk, of course, meaning all of them, disallow, // of course, meaning the root, so everything disallowed. And if you have disallowed and nothing, that means that everything is allowed. And the same goes for allow. You also have allow root and allow nothing, which is complete, everything's forbidden. And of course, you can do it also partially, where you allow a certain part of the site, but everything else is forbidden, and vice versa. And you can also exclude a single robot if someone is not following rules. Then you can tell him to go over to another site. Terms of service. Oh yeah. For robots.txt, I forgot the examples. So for Pontes technology, we have a textbook example of a simple robots.txt file where it is automatically generated. So it's just disallow nothing. So everything's allowed to be scraped. It's a used block. And you also have a sitemap, which we will cover later. So a sitemap, of course, being the map of all sites on the server. Nabava.net is also one Croatian site, which is I would say a price segregator, so someone who compares prices, and it's been a site for, I believe, 5 or 6 years, something like that. And as you can see, this is also a prime example how it's done. You disallow comments, you disallow anything that's connected to automating engagement and interactions on the site, but scraping, everything else is allowed, and they also, of course, provide a sitemap. As a counter example, this is what the preamble of the of the LinkedIn site is. So the comment and this at the start of robots.txt, the use of robots or other automated means to access LinkedIn without the express permission of LinkedIn is strictly prohibited. So of course, if you want the data of LinkedIn, you can get whitelisted, which is a pretty complex process, and of course you can use their API, but it's pricey. We'll also discuss this a bit later in the presentation. So regarding terms of service, that's the second point of contact which you should check. For example, booking.com. You're not allowed to monitor, copy, scrape, crawl, download, reproduce, or otherwise use anything on the platform for any commercial purpose without written permission of Booking.com. Will block anyone. So they won't sue you, but they will block you if you are doing something suspicious. Of course, will they know if you're using it for academia or if you're using it for a commercial purpose? Probably not. But you should, of course, be transparent, because when push comes to shove, you'll be blocked or worse, sued. So this is also something that you should check each time when, especially if you're automating something which is protected by a login. So if you're gonna use a dummy account to log in into a site and then crawl it, then you should of course check if that sort of practice is something which is frowned upon from the side of the terms of service. The crawl delay, also something that can be defined within the robots.txt file, but it's also common courtesy to put a minimal crawl delay if there is none. So for example, if it's a crawl delay and 6, which means you have to wait 6 seconds between two consecutive GET requests, we also have a variation of that request rate, which states how many requests per minute you are allowed. So, for example, in this case, 10 per minute, which is not the same as the crawl delay 6, which means you have to wait between each two, and for request rate you can fire all 10 and then wait for 1 minute. So it's on a greater scale of things, it's the same thing, but it's not exactly the same. And yeah, if there is no crawl delay stated, and if you're gonna do all millions of requests, of course, it's common courtesy to do a crawl delay of 1 or 2 seconds. User agent, of course, being the identifier that identifies you as you browse the web. Of course, this is how it looks like when you're browsing the web through a web browser, you should, when you're constructing a web scraper, you should identify your web scraper, especially if you're doing something that's for commercial purposes and if you're doing something with a large volume of GET requests. So you should always put a name and, of course, some contact details. So if people see that you're doing something wrong, they can contact you and tell you that you should tone it down, maybe put a crawl delay or just crawl it in a different time, which we will also discuss in 2 bullets. So for user, one great example for different user agent blocks within robots.txt is chatgpt.com, where you can see that they did a lot of name dropping. So they named each of their competitors to block them on their site. But then you have all different kinds of allows for the general case. So as you can see, general rules for all other bots, user agent, and asterisk, and at the end. But you can see, of course, before that, Perplexity has been blocked, Anthropic AI, Claude Web, and so on. So the sitemap. Sitemap is, of course, as the name suggests, the name of all the sites of the web server, and the purpose of the file is to tell web scrapers, or to be more specific, web crawlers, which sites are relevant, which site exist on the site and on the server, and of course, which are allowed to be scraped. So they're, in a sense, a protection, but also a guidance to the web crawlers. Those two are 2 examples from 2 different web shops in Croatia. Both, I believe, Vrutak and Rotodynamic are beverage shops, so supermarkets, but specialized in beverages. And as you can see, both have the most primitive type of sitemap. which is just a plain XML. And it works flawlessly. You have locations, so URL addresses, and for each location you have when it is updated, so a change frequency, when it was last modified, so how often does it get modified, when was it last modified, and of course in the second example you have the priority. So if you have a high priority, that may be a home page or a certain important page, but if it's 0.1, then maybe it may be just something that never gets changed and doesn't contain any relevant data. And of course, if we put a protocol called XLST, I believe, into the whole equation, then we get such a graphic one. So a graphic XML which shows the same stuff, and but in a more fashionable way, where you have different kinds of sitemaps for posts, for pages, personal, portfolio, and so on. It's also been automatically generated by Yoast. And yeah, of course, visit time. If you're gonna scrape a site which has most of the traffic in the European time zones for CEST, for example, then you should probably scrape by night in that time zone. So when there is not much traffic, to just be stealthy, incognito, and to not overload the server, especially if you're doing thousands or millions of requests. Regarding the privacy part, so we said about the legal part and the mechanisms, how to stay polite. The second part that we should also talk about is what you're doing with the data. Of course, when you've done the scraping, and if that scraping part, if the scraped data contains sensitive, protected info about people, especially here in Europe and the European Union, where we have GDPR and all sorts of regulations that protect such kinds of data, we should take into account what we will do, what we plan on doing with that data, and how are we going to use that. And if it's going to go outside of our hands, maybe we should anonymize the data. And of course, we should follow all sorts of local laws that may apply to this. In Croatia, there's a law called Zakon o elektroničkim komunikacijama, which means, of course, law about electronic communications. I believe around 20 countries in Europe have the same name for the law, and most of the laws forbid marketing outreach with the scraped emails. So they do not forbid, none of these laws forbid web scraping, but they forbid the practice of outreach towards people with the contacts that you've scraped from different sites. So this is something which is more or less defined or even mentioned in all of those laws. There's also a similar French law. I won't butcher the language. I want to pronounce that one, but it's probably the same thing. You can see an excerpt from that. It states the same thing. So forbids outreach for without consent from people that have their addresses scraped. As for knowledge prerequisites, of course, regarding the web, everything that's been presented is being presented in a HTML document. So you should know the HTTP protocol, how GET requests work. We'll also cover that in a few slides. The different status codes, and of course, how the HTML structure looks like, what it consists of. So ID, class, different kinds of tags, how they nest, and so on. And different kinds of selectors, which are of course being used to locate different stuff on the page that you're targeting. XPath selectors and CSS selectors, of course, being the two most important ones. And then in the post-processing part, when you've done the web scraping, you should always look for different methods and techniques to clean the data, because especially nowadays, as the web is as big as it is, you have different structured or semi-structured parts of the data where you cannot use the HTML structure to find what you're looking for. Maybe if you're looking for mail addresses, maybe you should just look for text post-processing techniques such as regular expressions, which are, of course, up till today, a strong technique, a powerful tool to do the post-processing, and maybe different kinds of edit distances to eliminate duplicate entries and so on. Regarding the status codes that I mentioned, of course, you do not need to cover all of them, but you should know the different categories of them. The most famous one, of course, being the 200 OK. If you get that, everything's been going great, and you can proceed. And of course, if you get 400 something, then you did something wrong. And if you get 500 something, then the server did something wrong. So those are the two main categories for the responses. And for the responses where something went wrong, of course, the main one, the most popular one being the not found 404. But if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, of course, you can also encounter bad request, forbidden, unauthorized, and so on. Then you should just take a step back and think about what you've done, and and think about maybe you do need some authorization, or of course, if you've been doing too many requests, or sometimes one request is too many requests, maybe they blocked you by IP, so you'll get a 429 or something like that. Which leads me to the challenges of web scraping, and the first one being how not to get blocked, or how to go around the block that you've encountered. For example, if you're scraping a site from Croatia or from France, which is located, I don't know, in Japan, maybe, and often they will block you just because of your IP address and your geolocation. And then you encounter something like that, so a Cloudflare warning or something similar. Then maybe you try to spoof your user agent. Maybe you'll just override user agent to look like it is a web browser. Maybe you'll rotate proxies to play cat and mouse with the server. But of course, the first question that you should ask yourself is if there's an API that you can use. Maybe if they're blocking you for a reason. So maybe they have an API, an official API that they want you to use, or maybe there is a proxy API which can help you in this case. And of course, CAPTCHA solvers and CAPTCHAs, which you can also encounter when you get blocked. And yeah, all the traffic lights. Oh, yeah. So there exist different kinds of CAPTCHA solvers on the market, and you can use them. You can train your own CV service to do the job for you. But of course, you should ask yourself the same thing. Maybe you're not allowed to be there. Maybe you just crossed the line with the number of requests that you've done within the last minute or hour. So there are all kinds of pre-questions which you should ask before. How do I go around this? And of course, the second challenge being how to scale it, how to ensure that everything went smoothly for a long time. So, for example, you construct a scraper, it works for 2 months, and then after the 2 months, something went wrong, something is broken because the HTML got changed. So the structure of the web page got changed, and of course, things change. You should construct a new scraper or modify the existing one, and it's not that scalable. So if you're gonna construct 20 different scrapers for 20 sites, and in a month 5 of them do not work, then you have to construct 5 more and so on. So the solution, of course, being the AI-powered scraping, or ruleless web scraping, ruleless web data extraction, which is still in an experimental phase. Some companies, especially the one called Zeit, is doing wonders with that. But as I said, it's pretty experimental. You do not have very powerful and open systems that can do such things, especially for low amounts of money. But yeah, we'll also mention Zeit again later. So what to use for scraping? The first part that you should try to find is the internal API. So you hit developer tools, you go into the network tab and fetch. And then you'll see, as you refresh the site, you will see which APIs got triggered and which data has been retrieved. And maybe you can use that API to simulate the whole traffic with the site. So the same stuff that your web browser does with the site, the same stuff you can simulate with Python. And maybe you'll get lucky and it's unlocked and you'll get the data, but usually you will not, and usually you will be blocked by Cloudflare. The second part that you can check is an external API or a service API, which means that the service has an official API that you can use to get the data that you long for. So the APIs, of course, are usually paid. You have some APIs, I believe the Wikipedia one is still free or something like that. But for the most valuable data nowadays, for example, the LinkedIn data, which you cannot get that easily, you have different kinds of APIs, the official one, and of course the proxy ones like Scraping Dog. I believe PyData also has one, which are good for that, but they are pricey when you scale things up. And of course, search engines. Most of the search engines disallow any scraping. For example, Google, you should not scrape Google. There is also one proxy API, I believe it's called SERP API, and they do Google scraping. They scrape everything that Google has when you enter a search, but you have also official APIs which you can use, which are pretty good and pretty cheap for doing a custom search. This one is probably the most important slide of the presentation. So the whole toolset, the whole arsenal of things that you can use when you need to scrape something. If the site is static, you should probably do just a GET request and then use beautiful soup to parse the HTML, or use Scrapy, which is also by Zeit or LXML or something like that. It's very similar. If the site is dynamic, so if the content is dynamically loaded, then you should probably look for web browser automation. So Selenium, Playwright, and Puppeteer, which we will also cover later. But there are also various no-code solutions. As I said, there are various APIs, proxy APIs that offer different kinds of data. PyData probably being the most famous one, especially for the LinkedIn data. Zeit has different kinds of APIs, but I would probably say they are the leader in the AI-powered scraping part. Oxylabs, Firecrawl, also famous examples. There are also various no-code solutions which are just drag and drop. So you do not need to operate any APIs. You just drag and drop stuff in the GUI, and then you get some data back. So ParseHub, Octoparse, and stuff like that will help you in this way if you're looking for a truly no-code solution. Beautiful Soup is probably the most famous example of a module for web scraping. It's pretty easy to set up and easy to learn. You just parse the HTML and then find all, use selectors, and it should be done. This is something which you should probably try first when you're starting off. Scrapy, the tool by Zeit, which is a beast, which is a framework which you should use if your project is mostly about web scraping. But for starting out, it may be not that flexible and maybe an overkill. But it also has a great learning tool, which is called Scrapy Shell, so you can experiment on different kinds of selectors. And they also have, Zeit also constructed 2 different sites for experimenting with web scraping, so Quotes to Scrape, and I believe the second one is Books to Scrape. We also have one slide later, which you can do anything on and just experiment and construct such spiders, as they call them, and extract different kinds of data. Protego is also one useful tool, which is also part of Scrapy and developed by Zeit, which is the parser for the robots.txt file, where you can automate the stuff. You do not need to manually construct a script which can follow the rules on the robots.txt, so it can also be very useful. Regarding Selenium WebDriver, it's a web browser automation tool, which means that it can simulate anything that you as a human user can do in a web browser. So clicks, filling out forms, simulating mouse movements, navigation, and so on. But of course, it loads everything, so it's much slower. But you can also use it in headless mode, so you do not need to load the browser, but it loads under the hood. Playwright is the main competitor of Selenium and probably more popular nowadays than Selenium. It's a new kid on the block, which is absurd to say because it's 5 years old. But yeah, when compared to Selenium, which is 20-something years old, it has a much smaller community, but a rising one. So and it can do anything that Selenium can. Some stuff can also be scraped faster, and the main advantage, I would say, is that it does not need a driver. So you do not need an executable to run a Playwright browser. To compare the tools, you have a table where, of course, for static pages, Beautiful Soup doing a simple request and parsing the HTML. If you're gonna do a web scraping, a fully fledged web scraping project, Scrapy is good for you, and Selenium WebDriver or Playwright for automating the web browsing part. As for the cookbook, one small example, and then we'll finish. I know that I am low on minutes. This is one example that you all probably know because it's the PyData Paris site where you have all sponsors listed. So we have platinum sponsors, gold sponsors, and so on. We select the content. We just right-click on it to highlight that part in the developer tools. Then we see what kind of tag it is, what kind of selectors we can use to target that stuff. And then we construct a simple Beautiful Soup script where we can see divs, h3 tags, which are, of course, headings. We use different classes, and then we extract all the sponsors. This is, of course, the static example, but we can also see the very good dynamic one, where when you go into the schedule of the PyData site, you have the whole GUI where you can click on stuff and then read about different sessions and different presenters. And we use, in this case, Selenium WebDriver for that. We get the driver, we get it headless, so it doesn't load up. And then we do the same stuff. This is a bit more of a complex example because you have to go into the shadow root, but nothing a simple JavaScript snippet cannot solve. And then it looks like this. It gets loaded up. And it does anything, as I said, anything a human user would do. For example, a human user that would collect that data would click on each snippet and then read or extract the data about the session and the data about the presenter and so on. And as you can see, everything is going smoothly with a delay of, I don't know, 2 seconds or something like that. And that's pretty much it. When it finishes, it serves the data in the similar way. Books to Scrape, as I said, is also a great resource to experiment with web scraping. A workflow to end things on, as I also said, check the legality, check the terms of service, and check the robots.txt. If it's not legal, maybe look for an API, an external API that you can use. If it's a gray zone or if it's legal, always proceed with caution. Then see maybe there's a hidden API which can fasten things, and then analyze the site, see if it's static, if it's dynamic, choose the right tool for the job, and of course store the data where you want. For the conclusion, of course, be polite, analyze robots.txt user agents and terms of service. And regarding web scraping part, so regarding the right tool for the job, if it's static, Beautiful Soup, I would recommend, and for the dynamic part, Playwright or Selenium. That's pretty much it. It turned into a lightning talk in the end. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.